The church was full long before the wedding started. People sat shoulder to shoulder on the wooden benches, whispering behind folded hands, pretending not to stare while staring all the same. The room smelled of old hymn books, perfume, dust, and judgment. At the front stood Chidinma Okafor, 19 years old, dressed in a borrowed white gown that did not fit her body. It was too loose at the shoulders and too wide at the waist. The lace around the sleeves had already started to turn dull with age. In her trembling hands was a small bouquet of tired flowers that looked as unhappy as she felt. She kept her eyes on the tiled floor. If she looked at the crowd too long, she would break. If she looked at the door too long, she might try to run. But there was nowhere to run to. Every person in that church knew why she was standing there. Some pitied her, some envied her, some acted shocked, but deep down, they were enjoying the story. The poor farmer's daughter was marrying a rich man old enough to know the world better than she did. At the other side of the altar stood Ikenna Eze. He was 34, tall, broad-shouldered and quiet. He was one of the richest cattle farmers around, a man people spoke about with respect, even when they did not like him. He wore a simple dark suit, and he held himself like someone who did not need to prove anything. His face gave nothing away. Chidinma had expected pride in his eyes, or pity, or the cold look of a man who knew he had taken something he wanted. But when she finally forced herself to glance at him, she saw only stillness. That somehow made everything harder. The pastor cleared his throat and continued the service.
Do you, Chidinma Okafor, take this man to be your husband? To have and to hold from this day forward? For better, for worse, in sickness and in health?
His voice rose and fell, but Chidinma barely heard the words. Her mind was somewhere else entirely. It was with her father. Mr. Okafor should have been there. He should have stood beside her or at least sat in one corner with his head bowed. But he was not there. Shame had swallowed him whole. He had stayed away because he could not bear to watch what his own helplessness had done to his daughter. 2 months earlier, their family had still been struggling, but there had still been hope. Then the harvest failed again. The little they had left dried up. The debt her father owed kept growing. The bank sent warnings. Then men started coming to the house more often. Quiet men, hard men. Men who stood outside and spoke in low voices that made the air feel dangerous. Then one day, Mr. Garuba came. He was the one who brought the offer. He sat in their small sitting room, crossed one leg over the other, and said there was a way to settle everything.
Okafor, the land stays, but the debt must be cleared. Chidinma will marry Ikenna Eze. That settles it.
Her father cried that day. Not loudly, not like a child. Just like a man whose pride had finally broken. He kept saying,
I did not plan this for you.
But in the end, he still said yes. And Chidinma was never really asked. The pastor turned to her.
Chidinma Okafor, do you take this man as your lawfully wedded husband?
Her throat closed. For one terrible moment, the whole church seemed to lean forward. She could feel their attention pressing against her skin. Her voice came out thin and shaking.
I do.
The pastor nodded and turned to Ikenna.
Ikenna Eze, wilt thou have this woman to be thy wife? I will.
The words were soft, but everybody heard them. It was not what people expected. A small murmur spread across the room. Even Chidinma looked up. Ikenna did not look at her. His jaw was set. His eyes stayed forward. The pastor finished the prayers quickly after that, as if he too had felt the strange shift in the room. Then he said the final words. I now pronounce you husband and wife. Something inside Chidinma sank. Not because the words were new. She had known this was coming from the moment her father stopped meeting her eyes in the house weeks ago. But hearing it aloud made it real. Ikenna turned to her and quietly offered his arm. She stared at it. This was the hand of the man who had just become her husband. A stranger, a wealthy man, a man she knew only through stories, gossip, and fear. He did not move closer. He only waited. 3 seconds passed. Then 4. Finally, Chidinma placed her hand on his arm. His body went still for 1 moment, then he began to walk her down the aisle. His grip was steady, careful. Not proud, not possessive, just steady. That was the first thing about him that confused her. Outside, people followed with their eyes as they stepped into the sharp afternoon air. The whispers did not stop. If anything, they grew louder. But Ikenna did not react. He simply led her toward the waiting vehicle. And without looking back once, Chidinma left the church as Mrs. Eze. The name sat inside her chest like a stone. The journey to Ikenna's house was quiet. Too quiet. Chidinma sat with both hands folded tightly in her lap, staring out through the side window as the road stretched ahead of them. She watched houses disappear behind them, then open land, then long empty spaces where the only sound was the vehicle moving over rough earth. She did not know what to say. She did not know what he expected. She did not know if he expected anything at all. Ikenna kept both hands on the steering wheel. His face remained calm, unreadable. For a long time he said nothing. Then after a bend in the road, he spoke in a low voice.
My name is Ikenna.
Chidinma blinked and looked at him. He glanced at her only briefly.
I know you already know that,
he added, almost as if he felt foolish after saying it. She looked away again. It was a strange thing to say to a woman who had just married him. But there was no mockery in his tone, only awkwardness. A few minutes later he asked,
Are you all right?
The question almost made her laugh, but there was no joy in it. She swallowed and said,
I am Mrs. Izzy now.
The words came out bitter, and she knew he heard it. He was silent for a moment. Then he said,
Only if you want to be.
Her head turned sharply toward him. He did not explain himself. He only kept driving. That confused her more than anything else that had happened since morning. By the time they reached his house, the sun had begun to soften. The compound was large and quiet. Not flashy, not crowded, just solid. The kind of place built by money that had been earned over many years. There was a wide front yard, a long veranda, a tall main building, and smaller structures farther behind for workers and storage. It was the kind of place Chidinma had only seen from outside when passing through bigger family compounds. Ikenna got down first and came around to her side. He opened the door and held out a hand. She hesitated, then placed her fingers in his hand as she stepped down. The moment her feet touched the ground, she pulled away. He noticed. His hand dropped at once. No complaint, no expression, just distance.
I'll show you inside,
he said. She followed him up the steps and into the house. The sitting room was large and warm. The furniture was simple but good. Everything looked clean, cared for, and lived in by someone who valued peace more than showing off. The air smelled faintly of coffee and wood polish.
This is the sitting room,
he said.
The kitchen is through there. Pantry is stocked.
If you need anything and I'm not around, you can tell Sul. He has worked with me for years. He said the name casually, but Chidinma remembered seeing an older man moving around outside earlier. That must be Sule. Ikenna led her upstairs. The hallway was wide and quiet. He stopped in front of a room and pushed the door open.
This is your room.
Chidinma stepped in slowly. The room was beautiful in a simple way. The bed was neatly made. There was a wardrobe, a small table, a mirror, and a clean curtain over the window. Nothing looked rushed. Nothing looked careless. Somebody had made sure the room was ready before she arrived. Then her eyes fell on the lock. It was on the inside of the door. Ikenna followed her gaze.
You can lock it. Use it if you need to.
She looked at him properly for the first time since they left the church. He continued.
I will not come in unless you ask me to. If I need to speak with you, I'll knock.
For a second, she forgot how to breathe. She had spent the whole journey expecting the opposite. She had expected quiet control. She had expected rules. She had expected the kind of power men used when they believed money had bought them rights. Instead, he was standing there giving her a lock.
You understand?
Yes.
He nodded once.
There is food downstairs if you are hungry.
Then he stepped back and left the room, pulling the door shut behind him. Chidinma stood frozen in the middle of the room. After a moment, she turned the lock herself. The click sounded louder than it should have. Then she sat down on the bed. The mattress sank softly under her weight. She stared at her hands for a long time. She wanted to cry, but the tears would not come. She felt too full and too empty at the same time. Downstairs, the house remained quiet. Night came slowly. Much later, when hunger began to pinch her stomach, she still could not bring herself to open the door. So she stayed inside. At some point, she heard faint footsteps in the hallway. They stopped outside her door, then moved away again. No knock. No voice. The next morning, when she finally opened the door, she found a tray just outside it. Bread and tea, covered neatly with a clean cloth. Still untouched. Still waiting. Chidinma carried the tray back into her room and sat on the edge of the bed with it. The tea had gone cold. The bread was no longer fresh. Still, she ate slowly, almost guiltily, as if she had taken something she did not deserve. After a while, she heard voices downstairs. One was Ikena's. The other was older, rougher, but not unkind. She guessed it was Sul. The men were talking in the dining area below. Their voices came up through the floor faintly, but the house was quiet enough for certain words to reach her.
Town has already started talking, boss.
That had to be Sul. Chidinma stopped chewing.
What are they saying?
A pause. Then Sul answered carefully.
You know how people are. They say you got yourself a fine bargain.
The tray in Chidinma's hand suddenly felt heavy. There was silence downstairs for a second. When Ikena spoke again, his voice was calm, but colder than before.
She is not a bargain.
Sul did not answer at once. Ikena continued.
She is my wife.
The words entered Chidinma's chest in a way she could not explain. Not because she believed them fully. Not because one sentence could wipe away how this marriage began. But because he had said it without pride, without mockery, without sounding like he was claiming ownership. Just fact. Below, Sul muttered something softer.
I was only saying what I heard. Then stop hearing foolish things.
A chair scraped back. Footsteps crossed the room. A door opened and closed. Silence returned. Chidinma sat very still. For a long moment, she looked at the locked door. Then slowly she stood up and crossed the room. Her fingers rested on the lock. She turned it. The sound this time was softer. She did not open the door. She just left it unlocked. That afternoon, she stepped out of the room for the first time since arriving. Only a little. Only long enough to use the bathroom and stand at the top of the stairs listening to the life below. The house did not feel threatening, just unfamiliar. Later that evening, when she went downstairs, she found fresh bread on the dining table and a pot of stew warming in the kitchen. Nobody called her. Nobody asked her to sit. Nobody made her explain herself. That strange patience followed her through the next few days. Ikena left for work very early each morning. She would hear the front door open before dawn, then the sound of his voice outside giving brief instructions. Sometimes Sul answered him. Sometimes another worker's voice joined in. Chidinma stayed mostly upstairs, but not all the time now. She started going to the kitchen when she was sure no one was there. She took food quietly and washed her own plate afterward. Once or twice she crossed paths with Ikena in the corridor. Each time he simply nodded and stepped aside to let her pass. He never tried to begin a conversation. He never watched her too long. He never asked why she was afraid. That too began to change something in her. Fear did not disappear, but curiosity began to grow around it. On the fourth morning, Chidinma woke earlier than usual. By the time she came downstairs, Ikena was already at the dining table with a cup of coffee and an open ledger in front of him. He looked up when he heard her footsteps. "Good morning," he said. His tone was simple, as if they had always greeted each other like that. Chidinma paused, then answered.
Good morning.
She moved to the kitchen, poured herself tea, and came back slowly. Her hands shook a little as she sat across from him. For a few moments they stayed in silence. Not warm silence. Not painful silence. Just the silence of two people who did not yet know how to begin. Then the question escaped her before she could stop it.
Why?
Ikenna looked up from the ledger. She tightened her fingers around her cup.
Why did you agree to marry me?
He closed the ledger gently and leaned back. For a while, he said nothing. Chidinma wondered if he would ignore the question. But then he spoke.
A man named Mr. Garuba came to see me some weeks ago.
He said.
Ikenna, there's a family in trouble. Debt and land issues. A marriage would help both sides. It solves everything. They are desperate. You would be their salvation. Think about it.
Chidinma felt her throat tighten. He told me you were from a decent family. Those things had become hard. He said the arrangement was practical.
And you agreed.
I said I would think about it. He held her gaze.
I live alone. This house is large. Too large for one person, most times.
He paused, as if the words did not come easily.
Maybe it would be good to have someone. Maybe it would be good to start life again.
Chidinma stared at him.
You did not know?
Know what? That I had no choice. His face changed. It was small, but she saw it, a flicker of shock, then anger, then something heavier. He sat up straighter. No, he said quietly. I did not know that. And for the first time since the wedding, Chidinma told someone everything. She told him about the failed crops, about the debt notices, about the men who came asking for money her father did not have, about hearing her father cry alone one night when he thought nobody was awake, about Mr. Garuba arriving with his smooth voice, neat clothes, and terrible solution, about the way her father's eyes had looked when he said, "Forgive me." By the time she finished, her tea had gone cold. Ikenna's jaw was tight.
If I had known, I would not have let it happen like that.
But it happened.
Yes.
You still married me.
He looked at her with that same steady face, but this time she saw the sorrow under it. When I saw you in church, I knew something was wrong, he said. I saw your face.
Stopping the wedding there, in front of everyone, would have brought Chidinma another kind of shame.
I did not know what would hurt you more. Chidinma lowered her eyes. He continued.
I am sorry.
The words hit her harder than she expected. A man like him was not supposed to apologize, not in a story like hers. She looked back up.
I thought the arrangement was agreed by both sides. I was wrong.
Silence stretched between them. Then he added,
You are my wife. But that does not mean I own you.
The sentence stayed in the room long after he spoke it. Chidinma did not know what to do with it. She had spent weeks preparing herself for hardship, for force, for survival. But Ikenna kept handing her things she did not know how to accept. A little later, there was a knock on the front door. Ikenna rose and went to answer it. A small boy stood outside with an envelope.
This came from the church women. They said I should give it to Mrs. Eze.
Ikenna took it, thanked him, and shut the door. He opened the envelope and read the note. His face darkened immediately. Without saying anything, he walked to the kitchen fire and dropped the paper into it. Chidinma frowned.
What is it?
Invitation.
To what?
A welcome gathering. Church women. Tea and fake smiles.
Despite herself, Chidinma almost smiled. Then she remembered herself.
We should go?
No. You do not owe them anything.
Chidinma looked at him and said nothing. That night, before sleeping, she left her room door slightly open. Not wide. Just enough. In the morning there was fresh bread on the table. Days began to settle into a pattern. It happened so quietly that Chidinma did not even notice at first. Ikenna woke before sunrise. She would hear his footsteps downstairs, the front door opening, and the sound of his voice outside speaking to workers. By the time she came down, the kettle had already boiled, and the kitchen no longer felt like enemy ground. She started helping herself without fear. Then one morning she found tomatoes, onions, and fresh pepper waiting on the kitchen counter, as if somebody had placed them there for her to use. No note, no explanation. She made stew. When Ikenna returned that evening, he ate it without ceremony. After a few spoonfuls, he said,
This is good.
That was all. But something inside her softened. Sul became easier to face too. He was a lean, older man with a patient face and careful eyes. He had worked with Ikenna for many years and seemed to understand more than he said. The first time Chidinma met him properly in the compound, he removed his cap respectfully and said,
Good afternoon, madam.
She almost told him not to call her that, but she let it pass. He smiled kindly and said,
If you need anything from town on market day, I can help.
Thank you.
she said. After that, it became normal to see him moving around the compound, speaking with workers, fixing things, carrying feed, or exchanging brief words with Ikenna. Slowly, Chidinma stopped hiding in the house as if she were passing through. She began doing small things, sweeping corners that had gathered dust, rearranging some kitchen shelves, sewing a torn curtain edge, washing cups before the housegirl from the workers' side came in. Nobody told her to. She just needed to feel useful. One evening, after supper, Ikenna stood by the veranda rail watching the sky darken. Chidinma came outside with a bowl in her hand after feeding the dogs near the back. He glanced at her.
You do not have to carry the whole house on your head.
She looked at him.
I know.
Then why are you trying?
She hesitated. Because sitting still reminded her too much of helplessness. Because doing nothing made her feel like a guest in a life she had not chosen. Because work was easier than thinking. But she only said,
I like to keep busy.
He nodded as if he understood more than her words. After a moment he said,
That is fine. Just do not feel forced.
There was that word again, sitting between them like something both of them were learning to walk around. That night, Chidinma went back to her room and looked around differently. It was still her room, still hers alone, but it no longer felt like a hiding place. It was beginning to feel like somewhere she lived. One Saturday morning, after breakfast, Ikenna asked,
Can you ride?
Chidinma looked up from the cup she was washing.
Ride?
A horse.
No.
Do you want to learn? The question caught her off guard. She turned fully to face him. Why? His mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile.
Because it is useful here. And because I think you might like it.
She did not answer immediately. Part of her wanted to refuse just because she did not know what it would mean to say yes to anything from him. But another part of her, the part that had started breathing again in this house, was curious. So she nodded. He took her outside and led her toward a calm brown horse with gentle eyes. This one is called Gold, he said. He does not trouble anybody. Chidinma stared at the horse from a safe distance. Ikenna seemed to understand. He took his time, showing her where to stand, how to place her foot, how to hold the reins. When his hand touched her elbow to steady her, it was brief and careful.
Do not grip too hard. Relax your shoulders.
I am trying.
I know.
There was no laughter in his voice, no impatience. After a few awkward attempts, she finally settled into the saddle. The horse moved a little. Chidinma gasped. Ikenna held the reins lightly and walked beside her.
You are fine. He can feel fear, but he can also feel calm.
I am not calm.
Then pretend.
For some reason, that made her laugh. A real laugh. Quick and surprised, as if it had escaped without permission. The sound stopped both of them. Chidinma looked at him at once, embarrassed. But Ikenna only said very softly, That is better. Later that week, they went to town together to buy supplies. The moment Chidinma stepped out of the vehicle, she felt the stares. They followed her like heat. Women by the fabric shop lowered their heads and whispered. Men near a roadside stand looked openly. A few older women pretended they were not watching her, but their eyes kept returning. Inside the provisions store, the woman attending to them spoke politely enough, but her smile was too tight. When they finished and stepped back outside, a man leaning near a shop post laughed under his breath. "Well," he said loudly enough for them to hear, "if it is not the new bride, hope our rich man is treating you well?" Chidinma froze. The man grinned wider. "Or maybe I should ask if he took it easy on the wedding night." Her whole body went cold. Before she could even react, Ikenna stepped forward. He did not shout. He did not grab the man. He simply placed himself between them and said in a low, dangerous voice, "If you have something to say it to me." The man's grin dropped immediately. For the first time, he looked properly at Ikenna and seemed to remember who he was speaking to. "I was just joking." "Then stop." The word landed hard. No more was needed. The man looked away. Ikenna turned and walked back to the vehicle. Chidinma followed, still shaken. They drove in silence for a while. Then Chidinma said quietly, "I am sorry." He glanced at her. "For what?" "For the gossip. For the shame people are bringing to your name." He faced the road again. "They can talk if they want." She looked at him.
It still affects you.
His hands remained steady on the wheel.
The only thing that matters is that you are safe.
The words strangely made her chest ache. She turned her face toward the window so he would not see how much that simple sentence had touched her. That evening she thought about it for a long time. Not the rude man, not even the shame, but the fact that Ikenna had not once acted like he was protecting his pride. Only her. A few days later, Chidinma started a small garden near one side of the house. It was nothing grand, just a patch of earth that caught enough light and looked empty enough to hold something living. Sul saw her one afternoon bending over the soil with a small hoe and brought her a watering can without asking questions.
Thank you.
You are welcome, madam.
This time she smiled back a little. That evening, Ikenna returned from work and found her kneeling in the soil, pressing small bulbs into the ground.
What are you planting?
Flowers.
What kind?
The woman who saw them said they bloom after some time. Not now.
You are planting for later.
Yes.
He was quiet. Then he asked,
Do you think you will still be here when they bloom?
The question was soft. No pressure in it, but it entered her more deeply than if he had shouted. She looked up at him. His face was calm, but she could see that he meant the question, not in a doubtful way, not as a challenge, just honestly. Chidinma looked back at the soil, then at the house, then at him.
Yes.
The answer came more easily than she expected. Something shifted in Ikenna's face. Not surprise, more like quiet relief. He nodded once.
That is good.
He turned to go, then paused.
Chidinma,
She looked up again.
I am glad.
He walked toward the house without saying anything else. Chidinma remained there for some time, her knees in the dirt, her fingers resting in the loose soil. The truth settled slowly inside her. She had meant what she said. She was beginning to see herself staying, not because she had nowhere else to go, not because fear still held her, but because this place no longer felt like punishment, and Ikenna no longer felt like the enemy her mind had built before the wedding. The more she watched him, the more she noticed things. The way he never returned from the farm without checking on every worker first. The way he listened more than he spoke. The way he carried sorrow quietly, as if he had trained himself to live with it without letting it spill onto others. One evening, she found him sitting alone on the veranda after sunset, not doing anything and just staring into the darkening compound. Not lonely in the simple way of a man who wanted company. Lonely in the deeper way of someone who had already known loss and learned to carry silence like a second skin. For the first time, Chidinma felt something new toward him. Not fear, not gratitude alone, a tender kind of sadness. It made her understand him a little more. And once she understood him, it became harder not to care. The night Chidinma saw the photograph, she could not sleep. The wind outside was soft, and the whole house had gone quiet, but her mind would not rest. She lay awake for a long time before finally getting up and wrapping a shawl over her shoulders. When she stepped into the hallway, she noticed a faint light downstairs. She moved slowly. At the front veranda, she found Ikenna sitting alone in a wooden chair. A lamp stood on the small table beside him. In his hands was an old photograph. He looked up when he heard her footsteps.
Did I wake you?
I could not sleep.
He nodded as if he understood. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Chidinma's eyes moved to the photograph again. Who is that? Ikenna looked down at it. Then, without hesitation, he held it out to her. Chidinma took it carefully. It was faded with age, but she could still make out the face of a beautiful woman with kind eyes. She was sitting down, holding the bundle of a baby against her chest. There was something peaceful about her smile. Her name was Amaka, Ikenna said. Chidinma looked at him slowly.
My wife. Before you.
The words were plain, but there was pain under them. Chidinma sat in the chair beside him. Not too close, just near enough. He kept looking ahead as he spoke.
She died 5 years ago during childbirth. The baby did not survive.
Chidinma's breath caught.
I am sorry.
She whispered. He nodded once, but did not answer immediately. The night seemed to grow even quieter around them.
Some people think grief ends after the burial.
He said at last.
It does not. It only becomes
Quieter.
Then one night like this, it returns and sits beside you again.
Chidinma lowered her eyes to the photograph in her hands. The woman in it looked so alive, so loved. It suddenly made sense. Many things that had not made sense before. His silence. The sadness that always lived behind his calm face. The way the house felt like it had learned how to be quiet with him.
I agreed to marry again because I was tired of being alone. That is the truth.
Chidinma looked at him.
But I did not marry you to replace her.
I know.
She said softly. He turned then and looked at her properly. There was tiredness in his eyes, but honesty too. Nothing hidden.
No one can replace Amaka. And I never expected you to try.
Chidinma nodded. For some reason, tears pricked her eyes. Not for herself. For him. For the woman in the picture. For the child who never got to live.
You loved her very much.
Every day.
There was no shame in the admission. No effort to sound stronger than he felt. Just truth. Then he looked up at the dark sky and added,
But grief is not the same thing as stopping life. At least I do not think it should be.
They sat there for a long time after that. No speeches. No heavy comfort. Just quiet company. At one point a dog barked somewhere far off, then all went still again. Finally, Chidinma handed the photograph back to him.
You are a good man, Ikenna.
He let out a faint breath that might have been the beginning of a laugh, but sadness held it down.
Many people would disagree.
She shook her head.
Many people do not know you.
His eyes rested on her for a moment.
And you do?
Chidinma thought about it. Then she said,
I am beginning to.
Something soft passed over his face. A tired smile. Small, but real. They went inside when the night grew colder. But after that conversation, something between them changed again. The distance did not disappear. It simply became gentler. And for the first time, Chidinma no longer saw herself as the only wounded person in the house. After that night, Chidinma began to change in ways even she did not fully notice at first. She stopped dressing like someone trying not to be seen. Instead of staying in loose wrappers all day like a frightened guest, she began wearing simple skirts and blouses she could work in. On some mornings, she tied her hair back and stepped outside early enough to feel the cool air before the workers filled the compound with movement. She became stronger too. There was now color in her face where fear had once drained everything. Her hands had grown rougher from work, but they no longer looked helpless. One afternoon, she helped Ikenna and Sul mend part of the fence behind the far side of the land. She held the wire while Ikenna fixed it in place. At some point, he looked at her and said,
You learn fast.
Maybe I am only trying not to embarrass myself.
You are not.
She believed him. That surprised her. Later that evening, as she was arranging cups in the kitchen, they heard a voice from outside. Anybody home? It was Pastor Danjuma, the same pastor who had joined them in marriage. He was a middle-aged man with a careful smile and the kind of eyes that liked peace too much. He greeted them warmly when Ikenna let him in.
Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. Eze.
Chidinma responded politely and invited him to sit. After a few pleasantries, the pastor turned toward her.
The women from church are having a fellowship gathering next Sunday. They asked me to personally invite you. They would be very happy to have you there.
Chidinma's stomach tightened slightly. Before she could answer, Ikenna said,
That will not be necessary.
Pastor Danjuma shifted awkwardly.
It may help things settle
Ikenna's expression remained calm.
or make them worse.
The pastor cleared his throat. Chidinma looked from one man to the other. Then she surprised both of them.
I will think about it.
She said. The pastor smiled at once, relieved.
That is fine. Very fine. Thank you.
He stayed only a little longer before leaving. As soon as the door shut behind him, Ikenna turned to her.
You do not have to go.
I know.
Then why consider it?
She leaned against the dining chair for a moment before answering. Because she was tired of hearing about people's opinions from inside the safety of the house. Because hiding had become another kind of prison. Because if she was truly beginning to live here, then she could not keep shrinking from every eye that judged her. She met his gaze.
Ikenna, I'm tired of being afraid.
Something moved in Ikenna's eyes. Concern, yes, but also respect. He did not speak immediately. Then he said,
I do not trust their kindness.
Neither do I.
Then why go?
Because whether I go or not, they will still talk. At least this time. I will look at them while they do it.
He held her gaze a little longer. Then he nodded slowly. All right. He did not sound happy about it, but he did not try to stop her. That night, after supper, Chidinma went outside to water the small patch where she had planted the bulbs. The earth was cool and damp beneath her feet. Nothing had bloomed yet, but life was there under the surface, waiting. She stood up and found Ikenna at the veranda, watching her quietly. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then he said,
If anybody says anything to hurt you,
I know. The church women, their tongues are sharp. Let them talk. I understand.
you do not have to prove anything to them.
Maybe not. But I need to prove something to myself.
He seemed to understand that. And because he understood, he let the matter rest. That night, Chidinma stood in front of her mirror for a long time before sleeping. She saw the same face, the same girl who had stood in church in borrowed lace and silent fear. But she was not exactly the same anymore. There was still pain in her, still uncertainty, still many things left unsaid. But there was strength now too, and the smallest beginning of peace. When she finally lay down, her room door remained slightly open. She fell asleep that way, not with fear sitting at the edge of the bed, but with the quiet knowledge that when morning came, she would meet it with open eyes. And downstairs, in the same house where she had first arrived like a prisoner, Ikenna sat alone for some time before going to his room. Not because he was troubled by her, but because for the first time in a very long while, the silence in his house no longer felt empty. He could hear life returning to it. And so could she. The next Sunday came faster than Chidinma expected. From the moment she woke up, there was a quiet heaviness in her chest. She dressed slowly in one of her best blouses and a simple skirt. She tied her hair neatly and stood in front of the mirror for a moment, looking at herself without really seeing her reflection. When she came downstairs, Ikenna was already waiting in the sitting room. He looked up at her and his face tightened slightly. Not because she did not look good, but because he was worried.
You do not have to go.
I know.
He stood up and came closer.
If you want.
She shook her head. No. Let me do this myself. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right. She started toward the door, but he spoke again. Chidinma. She turned.
If at any point you feel uncomfortable, leave. You do not owe anybody politeness at the cost of your peace.
She held his gaze and nodded.
I understand.
Then she left. The church hall where the women's fellowship met was beside the main church building. It looked cheerful from outside, but the warmth ended there. When Chidinma stepped in, conversation dropped almost at once. Faces turned toward her, then smiles appeared too quickly. The first woman to approach her was Mama Agnes. Mama Agnes was a heavy woman in her late 50s with a loud voice, sharp eyes, and the kind of smile that never reached her face. She held Chidinma's hand too long and said,
Ah, our new bride has come. You are welcome.
Thank you, Mom.
Chidinma replied. Then another woman joined them, thinner, younger, and dressed in expensive church clothes that made her look like she had come more to impress than to pray. Her name was Madame Bassi. She was one of those women people listened to because she always spoke like she was certain of herself, even when she was being cruel. We are happy you came, Madame Bassi said. Sit down, sit down. Chidinma sat. At first, everything looked normal. Tea was served. Some women talked about children, food prices, weddings, and church activities. A few laughed too loudly. A few stared too openly. Chidinma answered the questions that were safe to answer and kept the rest of herself hidden. Then the tone changed. It happened quietly. Madame Bassi leaned back in her chair and smiled at Chidinma in a way that felt wrong.
So tell us, how is married life?
A few women laughed under their breath. Chidinma kept her face calm.
It is fine.
Mama Agnes nodded as if she wanted to help.
That is good. We were all just so surprised.
Surprised by what?
Chidinma asked. Madame Bassi picked up her teacup slowly.
By how everything happened. One day your father was in debt. Next thing, you were married to a rich man.
The room grew quieter. Another woman, younger and eager to please the others, laughed and said,
At least your father found a solution.
More laughter followed. Chidinma felt heat rise into her chest. Madame Bassi leaned forward.
Do not mind us. We are only asking because everybody has been talking.
It is not every day a young girl is used to settle debt.
That one landed like a slap. For a second, Chidinma could hear nothing else. Mama Agnes shook her head in fake pity.
The world is hard. People do what they must.
Then Madame Bassi said the one thing that broke whatever patience Chidinma still had.
At least he paid well. Your father must have felt lucky.
The room went completely still. Chidinma stood up so suddenly that her chair scraped hard against the floor. Her hands were shaking, but her voice, when it came, was steady.
My father was desperate. There is a difference.
Nobody spoke. She looked from face to face.
When my family was suffering, none of you came to help. None of you offered food. None of you offered money. None of you offered kindness. But now you have enough mouth to judge.
Madame Bassi's smile disappeared. Mama Agnes opened her mouth, But Chidinma did not let her speak.
You say you are concerned, but you are not. You are cruel. That is the truth.
With that, she turned and walked out. She did not run. She did not cry. She walked out with her back straight and her head high, though inside her whole body was trembling. By the time Chidinma reached the house, the sun was already low. Her legs ached from the long walk. Her chest felt tight, and every cruel word still rang in her ears. She stepped into the compound and saw Ikenna standing near the veranda, as if he had been waiting there for some time. The moment he saw her face, he came down.
What happened?
That was all he asked. Not because he did not know something had gone wrong, but because he wanted her to say it in her own time. Chidinma looked at him for 1 second. Then everything inside her loosened. She told him. Not in a dramatic way, not with shouting. Just in the tired, painful voice of someone repeating an injury she had just received. She told him about Mama Agnes. She told him about Madame Bassi. She told him about the fake smiles, the mockery, the jokes, and the way they had spoken about her father like he sold a goat in the market instead of breaking under shame. Ikenna did not interrupt once. The more she spoke, the colder his face became. When she finished, silence stretched between them. Then he said,
They will not speak to you like that again.
Chidinma gave a weak, bitter laugh.
How will you stop them? You cannot control 3 people.
No. But I can make sure they hear me clearly.
She looked at him. There was something very quiet in his face then. Not noise, not rage, something firmer. For the first time since they got married, Ikenna reached for her hand and held it fully. Not to help her climb down from something. Not by accident. Not because duty required it. He simply held it. His palm was warm. His grip was steady. Chidinma felt her breath catch.
What are you going to do?
She asked. Something I should have done from the beginning. His thumb moved once over the back of her hand, gentle and brief.
Trust me.
She looked at their joined hands for a moment. Then she looked up at him and nodded.
Yes.
That evening they stood outside a little longer than usual, saying almost nothing. But there was something between them now that had not been there before. It was no longer just patience. It was no longer only respect. It was the beginning of choosing each other. Still, that night, after supper, Chidinma went upstairs with too much in her chest. The pain from the church women had not gone away. And now there was something else too. The fear of what it would mean if she truly stayed. That night, Chidinma could not sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, staring at the floor. Then slowly she stood up and opened the wardrobe. At the bottom was a small bag. She pulled it out and placed it on the bed. Her movements were slow and quiet. A few clothes. A wrapper. A blouse. The little things that still felt like her own. When she was done, she sat down again and took out paper. The letter took time because she kept stopping. At last, she wrote, I am leaving. Not because you are cruel, but because you are kind. I do not know how to stay in a life I did not choose. I do not want to be the reason people insult you. Thank you for all you have done for me. I will never forget it. She folded the letter and placed it on the small table. Then she looked at the bag and at the door. It was open a little, like it had been most nights now. That small opening had once meant safety to her. Now it looked like a question. Morning came grey and cool. When Chidinma carried the bag downstairs, Ikenna was already in the dining area. He looked at her, then at the bag, then at the letter in her hand. She placed it before him. He read it quietly. When he finished, he folded it once and set it down.
You are free to go,
he said. The answer hit her harder than if he had begged. Her eyes filled.
Then why do I feel trapped?
She asked. Ikenna stood up and came closer, but he stopped at a respectful distance.
By me?
He asked softly. She shook her head helplessly.
By everything. By this marriage. By people's mouths. By not knowing what is right anymore.
He was silent for a moment. Then she asked the question she had buried for too long. Why did you really marry me? He looked at her for a long time before answering. When I saw you at that altar, he said, I saw someone as lonely as I was. Chidinma did not move. He continued,
I thought maybe two broken people could still build something honest.
Not because of paper, not because of arrangement, but because maybe, if we were careful, we could choose peace.
His voice was low, steady, and painfully sincere.
I know you did not choose me that day, but I'm asking you now. Choose.
Her throat tightened.
Choose what?
Stay or go. But let it be your decision this time. Not your father's, not mine, yours.
That was the first true choice anyone had placed in her hands in a very long time. And suddenly the bag on the floor no longer looked like an escape. It looked like fear. Chidinma stared at it for a long moment. Then she bent down, lifted it, and carried it back upstairs. When she came down again, her eyes were red, but her hands were empty. She walked to the table, picked up the letter, tore it once, then again. Then she looked at Ikenna.
I choose to stay.
He let out a long breath, as if he had been holding it inside all morning. Neither of them smiled immediately. The moment was too full for that. But something deep and quiet settled between them. Then Ikenna said,
Let me do something for you.
She frowned a little.
What?
You will see.
What are you planning?
Not yet.
Should I not be afraid?
No.
She looked at him, and for the first time trusted that answer completely. The days that followed felt different. Not dramatic. Not suddenly perfect. Just different in a calm and steady way. Chidinma no longer moved through the house like someone waiting to be sent away. She moved like someone who had decided to belong there. And Ikenna seemed lighter too. He still rose early, still worked hard, still spoke more with actions than with words. But there was a quiet relief in him now, something that had not been there before. 2 days later he left the house early, dressed more formally than usual.
Where are you going?
To town?
For farm work?
No.
He picked up his keys. She folded her arms.
You are still not telling me.
Not yet.
She narrowed her eyes at him slightly, and he gave the smallest hint of amusement before stepping out. That same day, Sul came by the kitchen and found Chidinma preparing lunch. He scratched the side of his face and said,
Boss has been moving around a lot these days.
So you know.
Sul smiled in the careful way of a man who knew better than to speak too much.
I know something is happening. That is all.
By evening, Ikenna returned with a brown envelope. He did not put it away carelessly. He went straight to his room with it. The next morning, he left again. And the next. By now, Chidinma's curiosity had become almost painful. On the fourth evening, they sat on the veranda with cups of tea in their hands. The air was cool. Somewhere behind the house, one of the workers was laughing with another man. Chidinma turned to him.
If this thing you are planning ends with me fainting in public, I will not forgive you.
That made him laugh quietly.
You will not faint.
So it is public.
Yes.
Ikenna.
He reached over and took her hand again, just like he had after she returned from church.
Sunday. Trust me until Sunday.
She looked at their hands, then back at his face. There was so much calm in him that it slowly calmed her too.
All right, Sunday.
He nodded. They sat that way for some time after, hand in hand, saying very little. The silence no longer felt uncertain. It felt shared. And for Chidinma, that simple thing mattered more than she could explain. Sunday arrived bright and cool. The church was full again. The same faces. The same benches. The same whispering mouths. But this time Chidinma did not walk in as a frightened bride in borrowed lace. She walked in beside Ikenna as a woman who had made a decision. They sat in the front row. A few people stared openly. Others pretended not to. Chidinma noticed Mama Agnes seated with two other women on the left side. Madame Bassi sat farther back in a bright outfit, her chin raised as if she still had the right to judge anyone. Pastor Danjuma began the service as usual. A hymn, a prayer, a short reading. Then, just before he started the sermon, Ikenna rose to his feet. The room stirred immediately. Pastor Danjuma looked surprised.
Brother Ikenna, with your permission, sir, I would like to say a few words.
The pastor hesitated, then nodded.
Go ahead.
Ikenna stepped forward and turned to face the church. Silence fell so fast it almost felt heavy. He brought out a folded document from his coat pocket.
Most of you know how Chidinma and I got married.
No one moved.
Many of you decided the story for yourselves. Some said, I bought a wife. Some said her father sold his daughter.
The words caused small shifts in the congregation. A few people looked down. A few others sat straighter. Ikenna unfolded the paper.
What I paid was a debt, not a bride price for ownership. I cleared what her father owed. But Chidin has never been my property.
The church remained silent. He continued.
As of this week, a portion of my farmland has been transferred fully into Chidinma's name.
There were audible gasps now. People looked at one another in shock. He lifted the document slightly.
The land is hers, legally, completely. She can keep it, work on it, sell it, or walk away from it and from me if she ever chooses.
That decision is hers. Mama Agnes's mouth fell open. Madame Bassi sat frozen. Even Pastor Danjuma looked stunned. Ikenna's voice grew firmer, though it never rose.
She is not something I own. She is my partner. And if anybody still has something to say about how we came together, say it with both of us standing before you, not behind her back.
The room was so quiet that Chidinma could hear her own breathing. Ikenna folded the document again and returned to his seat beside her. When he sat down, he looked at her only once. His eyes said the rest. You are free. I meant it. Chidinma's heart was beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. The church still had not recovered from what Ikenna had said. People were frozen between shock and shame. Even the children sitting with their parents seemed to sense that something important had just happened. Chidinma looked down at her hands. Then she stood. The movement alone drew every eye back to her. She turned slowly to face the church. For one brief second, fear brushed her again. But this time it did not control her. She spoke in a soft voice, but the room was so silent that everybody heard every word.
When I came into this marriage, I came with fear. I came with pain. I came with shame that was not even mine. I did not understand this man. I did not trust him. I thought he would treat me like something he had paid for. But he did not. He gave me safety. He gave me patience. He gave me room to breathe. He gave me choice when nobody else did.
Chidinma turned slightly and looked at Ikenna for one moment before facing the church again.
I am not staying with him because I have nowhere to go. I am staying because I want to.
That one sentence settled over the room like final judgment. A rustle moved through the congregation. Then from the second row, an elderly woman began to rise slowly with the help of her walking stick. This was Mama Ruth. Mama Ruth was one of the oldest women in the church, a quiet widow respected by almost everybody, because she rarely spoke unless she meant what she was saying. She stood fully and faced them.
I was wrong. I believed what people were saying. I judged you both. I was wrong.
The room shifted. One man coughed awkwardly. Another woman looked away. Then Mama Ruth added,
And I am sorry.
After that, the silence changed. It was no longer the silence of people waiting to gossip. It was the silence of people being forced to see themselves clearly. Pastor Danjuma cleared his throat, still shaken.
Well, I believe that is enough for today.
A few weak laughs broke the tension. Then the service ended not with more judgment, but with prayer. Outside, after church, people gathered in small groups as usual. But the mood had changed. A few men nodded respectfully at Ikenna. An older trader greeted Chidinma with a softness that had not been there before. Nobody came with mockery. Nobody came with sharp laughter. The venom had broken. As they walked toward the car, Chidinma still felt like she was moving inside a dream.
You gave me land.
She said quietly once they were alone. Ikenna opened the passenger door for her.
I gave you freedom.
He replied. She stared at him. Why? He paused before answering.
Because words are easy. I wanted you to have something nobody could argue with.
She got into the car slowly. After he started the engine and they began the drive home, she kept looking at him as if seeing him freshly all over again.
You had all that planned?
Yes.
You went to the lawyer? Yes.
Did Pastor Danjuma know?
I do not think even Pastor Danjuma knew enough.
Oh, Ikenna.
A small, real laugh. When they reached home, Sewell was waiting near the front steps. News had already started moving ahead of them the way it always did in places like that. He looked from one face to the other and
So it is true.
Ikenna glanced at him. You too? Sewell laughed. Boss, by evening even goats will hear this story. Chidinma smiled despite herself. That same evening, they sat together at supper, not across from each other, but side by side. There was no special speech, no dramatic declaration, just the deep quiet of two people who knew something important had happened. After the meal, Chidinma helped clear the table. When she turned, Ikenna was standing close behind her. Not too close. Just enough. She looked up at him. For a second, neither of them moved. Then Chidinma rose slightly and kissed his cheek. Soft, brief, but fully hers to give. Ikenna went still. When she stepped back, he looked at her as if he wanted to say many things at once. Instead, he said only,
Thank you.
No, thank you.
That night, when she went upstairs, she did not leave her door slightly open. She left it wide open. After that Sunday, life became quieter in a better way. The town did not become perfect. Some people still talked. Some still carried old pride inside them. But the cruel confidence was gone. Nobody now spoke of Chidinma like she was a helpless girl trapped in a rich man's house. She had land in her own name. She had spoken for herself. And most importantly, she had chosen openly. Weeks passed. Then the season began to change. The ground softened after the dry months, and small green life started appearing in the garden. One morning, Chidinma stepped outside and stopped when she saw the first flowers pushing through the soil where she had planted the bulbs long ago. She smiled to herself. Ikenna found her standing there. They came out, she said. He looked at the flowers, then at her face. Yes, they did. She folded her arms lightly.
You asked me if I would still be here when they bloomed.
And you said yes.
I did.
He came to stand beside her. For a moment, both of them simply looked at the flowers. Then Chidinma said,
I think that was the first time I admitted it to myself.
That you would stay? Yes. He nodded slowly.
I think I knew.
You knew?
Not at once. But after some time, yes.
You like pretending you know everything.
No. Only the important things.
Only the important things. That made her laugh again. The laughter had become easier now. Natural. Not surprising anymore. Later that week, she began planting young fruit trees near the edge of the property that now belonged to her. Sewell helped carry the seedlings. 2 younger workers dug the holes. For the first time, they all worked under her direction without awkwardness. Everything was simple. Everything felt right. When they finished, Ikenna came to where she stood with dirt on her hands and sweat on her forehead. "These will take years before they bear fruit," he said. Chidinma wiped her brow with the back of her hand. "Then it is a good thing I am not going anywhere." He smiled. And because nobody was watching closely enough to matter, he reached out and brushed a streak of dirt gently from her cheek. Something soft settled in her chest, all over again. One evening, not long after, Chidinma and Ikenna walked through the land together as the sun began to set. The light was soft and golden. The new trees stood in neat little rows farther behind them. Somewhere beyond the fence, cattle moved slowly, and the air smelled of earth cooling after a warm day. They walked in easy silence until they reached the boundary line between the part of the land that belonged to Chidinma and the part that remained in Ikenna's name. A wire fence marked the line clearly. Ikenna stopped and rested one arm on the post. "If you want," he said, "I can have this fence removed." Chidinma looked at it, then at the land on one side, then at the land on the other. She shook her head. "No." He turned to her. "Why?" She smiled faintly. "Because I like it there." "The fence?" "Yes." He looked surprised. "You want a division between us?" She stepped closer and placed her hand on the post. "No, I want a reminder." "A reminder of what?" She looked up at him. "Of the fact that I crossed it by choice." The words sat between them quietly. Ikenna's face changed, softening in a way she had come to know well. After a moment he said, "I am proud of you." Chidinma's eyes warmed. "I am proud of us," she replied. For a second, he just looked at her. Then he bent and kissed her forehead. It was not rushed, not uncertain, just full of everything they had survived to get there. They stood together a little longer before turning back toward the house. From where they were, they could already see the lights from the veranda. Warm yellow light spilled across the front steps. The house no longer looked like a place where strangers lived in careful silence. It looked like home. As they walked, Chidinma glanced once toward the garden. The flowers were there. The young trees were there. The life she had planted with shaking hands months ago was slowly answering her. By the time they reached the door, night had started to settle. Ikenna pushed the door open and stepped aside for her to enter first. Chidinma paused at the entrance and looked back once more at the darkening compound, the quiet land, the path they had just walked. Then she looked at him. "Are you coming?" he asked gently. She smiled. "Yes." This time there was no fear in the answer. She stepped inside. He followed. And in the house where silence had once lived like a wound, laughter, peace, and the soft sound of shared life began to grow at last.